On the Suunto D4i, you can see down here in the smallest little writing, it tells you what battery you need, so CR2450. Make sure when you're buying these online or at a local hardware store that it says specifically it will fit a Suunto D4, D4i, or D4f, because there are two sizes of CR2450 and the deeper set ones are too tall to close the back of the case. Before you take off the back of your case, you're going to want to look at where this dot is to line up as a reference for when you have to put things back together again. So most Suuntos and most dive computers actually will have a dot on both the case and the watch itself. But in my Suunto D4i, it only has the dot on the dive computer itself. It doesn't have the dot on the back of the case. If you're reading Suunto D4i, the dot is on the left-hand side when I put it back together. On the D4, it's a lot easier. You can see that the dots just line up and then you know you have it on the right side. The only other difference with the D4 is that it's a Phillips screwdriver instead of a Torx 6-point star. So make sure that you're using a proper size screwdriver. You're not using one that's too big and too small. You'll strip the screws. In this case, this one fits really nice and snug. There's not much wiggle room at all. And take the other side out. Okay, we can take the case off now. The old battery was a CR2450. Take that out. And we can put in our new one. And the new one, CR2450. So while we're in here, we want to inspect our O-ring also. I can see a little bit of dust on it. We're going to take it off, inspect it, and it could be that we need to change it. I'm going to change it anyways because it's going to be a couple years before I'm back in here again. So to take the O-ring out, you want to use a plastic tool that's not going to scratch up the case. You could also use a tool like this, or even a flathead screwdriver, or even a pair of tweezers. But the issue with that is that you could scratch up the steel a little bit, then lead to maybe a leak. So it's just better to use a plastic tool. You could even use a guitar pick. There we go. So there's the old one. I can see a bit of dust on it. I don't see any cracks or abrasions, so I could get away with using this one also after I clean the dust off, a little bit of dust. But I have a brand new one over here anyways, so I'm gonna change it. So if we inspect the groove where the O-ring sits, you can see a tiny bit of dust in there, which we definitely want to be cleaning out. You don't want to add any more dirt or dust into the groove. We'll take our little mini paintbrush or makeup brush or whatever, make sure that it's a clean one. You're not using one that's covered in old paint. And we're just gonna clean that out, get rid of any dust. Any dust could lead to a slow leak, which then of course will lead to your dive computer being damaged and you just voided the warranty because you were doing the battery change yourself. So make sure that you're really careful with this and you remove any dust. So our new O-ring, even though it's new, you want to make sure that you inspect it. Don't trust it because once again, you don't have a warranty anymore, and you want to make sure that you're putting in an O-ring that doesn't have a crack. Just because it's new doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. So this grease is something that you don't want to put too much on. If you put too much on, it's going to attract dust. This is a mistake that I've made in the past. Thankfully, I've always got away with it and it's never been an issue. And with clean fingers, just put a little bit of a dab on and run that grease around on the O-ring. The grease is just going to fill in any little cracks and make sure that everything is nice and watertight so that no water gets in when you're under all sorts of water pressure. If you look at the O-ring now, you can see it's all nice and shiny. So grease is covering all of it. I don't see any spots where it's missing, but we don't have any globs either. You want to make sure that you're not getting grease inside the back of the case, so you want to be really careful with this. And you just slide the O-ring around the outside and it pops right on. And you want to do one more inspection around the edge, set in place nicely, and I don't see any dust either. We're looking good. And we're ready to put things back together. Make sure that this black dot there lines up on the left-hand side of the letters. Just going to drop the screws in. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to put even pressure down on both of the screws. So we're not going to fully do the one screw and then do the other screw afterwards. We're going to do the one screw, then the other, then the other, then the other, and we're going to keep even pressure on the back of the case. And we'll switch. So every few turns, you want to switch. And we're halfway there. Just want to make sure that everything's lined up properly. It looks pretty even. Yeah, things are going in the right direction. You really don't want to be stripping these screws, otherwise you're going to have big problems next time you try change it, and you're also not going to be able to get it tight enough on this time. So make sure that you're using the proper size screwdriver. Before I completely snug things up, I want to make sure everything is set properly. That looks good. That looks good. Should be turning on. And there we go.